Well, our final reading this morning comes from the Law. By that, I just really mean the first 5 books of the Bible, known in Hebrew as Torah, known to the people of God as the Law for thousands of years. And in many ways, all of the Old Testament, maybe a lot of Scripture have been referred to that way. But that's all I'm getting at by calling Genesis the Law. But commands come in this passage as well. This is from Genesis, the 9th chapter, and I was just going to begin in verse 8, and I decided this week, late this week, after the bulletin was printed, that I really need to read beginning in verse 1. We're starting a series here in the first few weeks of Lent. Well, all of Lent will be on covenants and commands, and this is the covenant with Noah. We'll look at other covenants along the way, but God gives commands to Noah as well, and so I thought, well, it's silly to leave those out and just give you the covenant. So this is Genesis chapter 9, beginning in verse 1. Then God blessed Noah and his sons, saying to them, "Be fruitful, and increase in number, and fill the earth. The fear and dread of you will fall on all the beasts of the earth, and on all the birds in the sky, on every creature that moves along the ground, and on all the fish in the sea. They are given into your hands. Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Just as I gave you the green plants, I now give you everything. But you must not eat meat that has its lifeblood still in it. And for your lifeblood, I will surely demand an accounting. I will demand an accounting from every animal, and from each human being too. I will demand an accounting for the life of another human being. Whoever sheds human blood, by humans shall their blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made mankind. As for you, be fruitful and increase in number. Multiply on the earth and increase upon it." Then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, "I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you. I will establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth." And God said, "This is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it, and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth." So God said to Noah, "This is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on the earth." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, one of the reasons that I belabored the point of the building of the ark and the being in the ark was that it's easy for us to forget. This conversation Noah has with God, really that God has with Noah and his sons, is a long time coming. It's been more than a year since Noah was told to build an ark. And for somebody that, if you read Genesis carefully, it sure looks like it hasn't rained yet, to say there's going to be a great big flood and then rain's going to come down from the sky and you're going to need a place to be safe. It's no wonder that many people have made much of Noah's confusion, perplexity, wondering if this could really be what God wanted. No wonder also that every movie presentation I've seen of Noah has had people jeering at him, sneering, mocking him for making this great big boat out in the middle of land, as if there was such a thing as rain, as if there were such a thing as floods that would cover the entire earth. And when it happens, it takes a long time. I'm not sure why that strikes me. It's not really necessarily my point. But remember that this is part of God's working out a restarting, as Alex put it, a restarting of creation and of humanity. God makes a people for himself. And he starts with Adam and Eve. And making a people for God's own self is one of his major priorities. People who know God, who are in relationship with God, and then who can tell others about God, seems to be God's big plan. With Adam and Eve, they are in paradise, in this perfect Eden, walking and talking with God, and everything is great. And then comes the fall. It is not like the fall appeared. Adam and Eve turn away from God, disobey God, sin enters the world, and then God goes through a process of making things new again, here with Noah, and then again with Christ, and then again at the end of all things. a people for himself, a people marked as his own, a people who can, as Paul put it, sing to the praise of his glorious grace, tell God's glories, and sing God's worth. And God starts over in many ways with Noah and his family and makes a covenant with them. I'm going to take a little rabbit trail on covenants. I'm coming back, and it's going to be a bit more than you want to know. But covenants come up all the time, and we're going to be talking about covenants. And so I'll remind you of a few things. Covenants are more than a contract, but they are formalizing a relationship. They are setting out expectations and obligations for two parties. And it wasn't just all the covenants in the Bible that you're going to run into. It mostly have to do with God and God's people. But they were around at the time. In the ancient world, we find lots of copies of covenants. And basically, it was usually between kings or between nations. And the more powerful nation would impose this treaty, but really a covenant, with another country. If you're lucky, you get to cut the covenant. You don't make a covenant, you cut a covenant. If you're lucky, you get to cut the covenant with the more powerful king and army before they destroy you. But if you're in rebellion, or if you're trying to stand firm, and if you're trying to stand up against the superpower, and then you get defeated, the covenant's not going to be so nice to you. Because one of the things that happens is it lays out, these are the things that you're going to do, and these are the things the other party will do. Obligations of the covenant. And then there is a blessing and a curse. If you keep the major tenets, if you keep the obligations and expectations of the covenant, then you will be blessed. If it's between nations, then I'm not going to come and kill you again. If it's between you and God, it's a different thing. Then there are curses. If you do not keep the terms of this covenant, then bad things are going to happen to you. And if it's between two nations, the more powerful nation calls on whatever gods they believe in to come and curse the people. Again, that's one of the reasons I wanted to start with the first verse instead of the 8th verse, because God then blessed Noah. It's part of the covenant. Okay, enough about covenants, except to say that what usually happens, you have two parties, they make an agreement, they need witnesses, not just people to sign on the line, but usually they call in gods and other people or other nations as witnesses. So whatever gods they believe in, they call on them to witness the covenant. Here is the crazy thing. I think with Adam and Eve, certainly explicitly here with Noah, with Abram, and with other people along the way, God makes the covenant where he is not only the witness to the covenant because he is the one true God, he is also one of the parties. He is one of the people who has obligations and expectations, and God says, I will do this, and I want you to do that. With Noah and his family, it was be fruitful, increase, and multiply, because we just judged all the rest of the earth. We need people here again. And lays down some other things about how they are to live and what they are to eat, how they are to rule each other, or what are the consequences of one person killing another. But the major thing is, be fruitful, increase, multiply upon the earth. And then God sets out his part of things. I now establish my covenant with you, your descendants after you, and every living creature on this earth. God has made a relationship not only with Noah, not only with his family, but everyone coming after them, you and I, and every living creature on earth. Ooh, silly tangent segue. But yet another reason, by the way, for this idea, there are some pastors over history who have decided it's important to tell children that animals don't go to heaven. Tell me where you find that. New heavens, new earth. This earth has animals on it. New earth, why wouldn't it? I'm making a covenant with you and your descendants and every living creature. If God's making a relationship with them way back in the times of Noah, why on earth wouldn't he in the new heavens and the new earth? We'll talk about that another time, but that's kind of important to me. Never again will all of life be destroyed by a flood. Peter is so taken with this Noah story. Most of the letter of 1 Peter is taken up with various little riffs and spins on things that are happening. First of all, this very interesting idea that Noah and his family in the ark go through a sort of baptism. Baptism for us is almost entirely positive. We don't think of it unless we say a baptism by fire, right? And that's when you kind of get thrown in before you're ready and all these things happen and it's overwhelming. But if you make it through, congratulations, you have now succeeded. Baptisms by fire we don't like. That may have come from Peter too, I'm very sorry to say. Because Peter is very struck with this idea, never again will a flood destroy all the earth. But by the way, before the new heavens and new earth show up, it's going to come in fire and judgment will come in fire. I don't know if that's where we got baptism by fire, but both those ideas are there in Peter. Things will still happen. We will still have destruction and death. We will still have disease and dying. We will still have floods, by the way. but never again a flood of judgment that completely destroys all humanity, all living creatures. God is promising to protect us and the creatures of this earth and this earth itself until such time as he makes it new. Not by flood, anyway. Never again by flood. So the floods that do come are part of sin working its way out in this world, the destruction that comes by it. But it is not a judgment from God, because he's promised never again will there be a worldwide judgment that comes by flood. That is done. That's God's promise. Part of his covenant, part of his relationship with his people is saying, I will protect you in this particular way. And one of the things that you may be most afraid of, particularly in the first and second generation after the flood, the only people who remembered are the people who survived it, right? But it was a terrifying thing. Our baptism is very different, obviously. But Peter's struck with this idea that Noah and his family were taken safely through. And not only the ark, but in some way the waters in which through which the ark went were for their salvation and deliverance. The ark saved them from the flood. For us, we go through waters, right? We've come a long way. Noah and his family are in a great big ark with all these animals, and they come through a huge flood that has judged all the earth. They are saved, and that is a symbol. Those waters are a symbol, Peter says, of our baptism. And then we go through a lot of people who are immersed completely, so that you go through the waters of baptism, and then we make our way to a sprinkling of water on the head of an infant is the same as being saved. Not by the water, not by the flood, not by anything, but by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Baptism saves you by Christ being raised from the dead and ascended into heaven and at God's right hand. That's baptism. Baptism comes up in the Peter passage and the Mark passage. That's why our affirmation of faith will be what it is. But baptism, importantly, also is the way in which God makes a people for himself, and then makes a relationship with them. In this case, an explicit covenant with Noah as he has made a new people for himself. All these people who had turned away, all these people who were rejecting God, except for Noah and his family, they are saved and they become the forefathers and foreparents and ancestors of those who are being remade by God to be God's people. And they are able to live in such a way that they can proclaim the glories and mysteries and wonders of God. We could have died, and yet we lived. We saw this destruction, and yet we were brought safely through. Our baptisms are where God makes us his own people, his own children, daughters and sons of the Most High God, where whether we recognize it or not, we also can say we would have died. More than that, we were dead, and we have been raised to life to be God's own. God promises to make us his own through Jesus Christ. And our baptism is a way of symbolizing the cleansing from sin, but also the deliverance, the salvation, the rescue that we needed. And we are a people who don't like to admit that we need rescuing from anything, right? We are capable people. We are competent people. We can handle things on our own. Baptism is one of those times that we are faced with the fact that, but by the grace of God, I am lost and I am dead. Thing one. God makes us his own. The other thing that it also really strikes me about this is the way that God talks about the sign of the covenant. I'm going to set my rainbow in the sky, and then when I see it, I'm going to remember. That is, I think, supposed to make you smile, or at least knock you over with the gravity of the whole situation. It makes me smile because it is not as if God is up there in heaven with a great big desk with papers everywhere and angels running to and fro, and he's having to say, you go take care of this and you take care of that. No, there's a famine there and a flood down there. We got to fix that. And meanwhile, people are coming in through the gates and somebody's got to write their names down and somebody's got to deal with all this stuff. And meanwhile, Jesus is at his right hand going, is it time yet? Is it time yet? And God the Father says, no, it's not. That is not what's happening in heaven. He is not so busy that all of a sudden he looks down and goes, oh, there's a rainbow. That's right, you know. Somebody take a note. Gabriel, take a note. No more destroying the whole earth by flood, because there's the rainbow. And in case I forget, if you hear me saying, you know, a really big flood would take care of all these problems, you need to remind me, bring me this little piece of paper that says, no, never again, because you saw the rainbow. God does not need to remember anything. God does not forget. I love that he puts it this way, though. I will remember when I see the rainbow, this everlasting covenant, eternal covenant between God and every living creature of every kind on the earth. God does not need to be reminded. But there are those who do, and that's you and me. We need to be reminded that God will never forget his covenant, his relationship, his setting out before us that no more by flood judgment will not come that way. And more than that, you have been rescued through little flood waters, if it's a little sprinkle of water on your head, smaller flood waters, if you've been immersed and then brought up again out of your baptismal waters. You have been saved, and God will remember because he doesn't forget. When I see this, when the rainbow's in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. When God makes a promise, God does not forget, does not need to be reminded, is true to his word. And part of his word here is that when judgment comes, I will save my people. As Noah and his family were brought safely through the flood, so this new people that I'm making, starting with Noah and going down through the generations of this new people I'm making through the new covenant, which we'll get to eventually in Lent, this new covenant in Jesus Christ, I will save my people no matter what comes. Some of us need to hear over and over again that the great big stuff, judgment, wrath, anger of God coming on righteously, coming on sin and all that's opposed to God's working in the world, we need to be reminded we can be saved by Jesus Christ. By the resurrection of Jesus Christ, his victory over sin and death, and being made his own, we can be saved. All of us need to hear that, but some of us don't dwell so much on the big stuff, the big judgment that is coming. All of us, all the time, need to be reminded that God is protecting us as surely as if he had built a boat by his own hands and is seeing us safely through whatever storms it is that we travel. God does not forget you, and God does not forget me, and God does not need to be reminded by a rainbow that instead of judgment comes mercy. Instead of wrath comes grace. Never again will I judge the world with a flood, but you, my people, I brought safely through the flood. I'm making a relationship, a covenant with you, between God and you and every living creature of every kind on the earth, so that all can be redeemed, so that all can be made new. I don't know if you're taken with rainbows. I certainly am. I love to see a rainbow. I will go out in the rain hoping to see if it looks like the sun's over there. I'm going to go looking for a rainbow. Seen some beautiful ones even since we've moved here. They're not reminding God of everything, but I am reminded that there is a God who is at work, a God who has saved me and has offered salvation to us and to this world. I don't know if you saw it. It was a rerun I saw not that long ago, but a very sweet video of a little girl who is being videoed while she's looking at a rainbow. And the thing about this rainbow is that where it comes down is right about in the neighborhood where her grandparents live. So she calls her grandmother on the phone. She says, I'm looking at this rainbow, and it's red and orange and yellow and green and blue and purple, and it's beautiful, and it looks like it's coming down right on your house. She says, Grandma, I think the pot of gold may be at your house. It sure looks like it. Well, the Bible doesn't say anything about a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it does say that at the end of the rainbow, or at the sign of the rainbow, we are reminded. God doesn't need to be reminded. We are reminded that there is a God of love and mercy who saved his people, Noah and his family, who saved us in our own baptisms, who will see us safely through whatever storms we may have to weather. God is with us and will save us. Instead of judgment comes mercy. Instead of wrath comes grace. Will you please join me in prayer? Oh Lord, help us to come to you as those who are aware of our great need. Noah and his family knew once they were on that boat and the floodwaters were rising that they needed salvation and deliverance. And you would cause them to make a vessel that would see its way safely through to dry ground once again. We are those who sometimes forget we're on a great big boat. We are those who sometimes forget that we are in need of deliverance and salvation. But for those of us whom you have grabbed, whom you have enabled by your Spirit to claim that Jesus Christ is Lord, remind us that we too once were lost, and we too once were dead, but you found us and brought us back to life. And Lord, we pray for those who do not yet know that there is a God of love and a God of mercy and a God of great power. By the way that you've changed us, help us also to let this world know that there is salvation in Jesus Christ. By his life and death and his resurrection from the dead, we can be saved. Help us to live that out as your people, those who are in covenant relationship with you, the covenant community by our baptisms. We thank you and praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.